You carry a capacity for feeling that most cannot fathom, and for years you believed this gift required you to absorb the suffering of others without limit. Not everyone possesses this depth of sensitivity, but those who do often discover a terrible truth, that the world mistakes their permeability for weakness, their compassion for compliance. And this is why the moment you stop being nice marks not an ending, but the beginning of your actual power. Something has already shifted in your psyche. You may not yet recognize its full significance, but beneath conscious awareness, a recalibration has begun. This is not betrayal of who you are. This is the emergence of who you were always meant to become. According to my research into the compensatory functions of the psyche, what appears as empathic breakdown is actually the beginning of a profound reclamation. Through years of studying those who carry extraordinary sensitivity, a pattern emerged that defied conventional understanding. The empath who collapses is not failing. The psyche is rejecting a false adaptation that has outlived its protective purpose. You feel it, do you not? That strange exhaustion that accompanies even small acts of kindness. The way your body contracts when someone approaches with their familiar needs. This is not cruelty awakening, this is intelligence. The unconscious, as I came to understand, refuses to sustain patterns that betray the self indefinitely. What you experience as compassion fatigue is the psyche's rebellion against a persona that was never authentically yours. You were trained into niceness. You were conditioned to believe that your worth depended upon your willingness to dissolve your boundaries in service of others' comfort. What I discovered through decades of analytical work is that niceness in the empath is not kindness at all. It is a survival mechanism born from early adaptation to emotional chaos. This revelation disturbs many who hear it. They have built entire identities upon the foundation of their exceptional compassion. But depth psychology reveals a distinction that changes everything. True kindness flows from surplus, from wholeness, from a self that is intact. Niceness, by contrast, operates from deficit, from the terror that if you do not please, you will not be safe. If you do not accommodate, you will be abandoned. If you do not absorb the feelings of others, you will be deemed selfish, cold, unworthy of love. The empath child learns quickly. In an environment where emotional volatility reigns, where a parent's mood determines the safety of the entire household, the sensitive child develops a radical skill, the ability to feel into others so completely that they can predict and prevent emotional storms before they arrive. This is not a gift bestowed by the universe. This is a trauma response of breathtaking sophistication. You became nice because it kept you alive. You became pleasant because anger in your environment was dangerous. You learned to manage the feelings of adults before you could manage your own, and this reversal, this fundamental betrayal of the natural order, created a psychic wound that you have carried into every relationship since. But here is where it becomes disturbing. The unconscious does not forget its true purpose. Beneath the constructed persona of the endlessly giving empath, something waits. The self, in its wisdom, will not allow you to remain in spiritual servitude forever. And when the compensation begins, when the psyche starts to correct this imbalance, you interpret it as something going wrong. You believe you are becoming hard, cold, damaged. You are not. You are becoming whole. The first transformation manifests as a strange, almost frightening indifference to outcomes you once obsessed over. Where previously you would lose sleep over whether someone was upset with you, whether your words landed correctly, whether you had done enough. Now there is silence. Not the silence of suppression, but the silence of genuine detachment. This indifference is not apathy. What the collective unconscious shows us is that true peace exists only where the outcome no longer holds power over your internal state. The empath who stops being nice discovers that they can witness another's disappointment without rushing to fix it, without contorting themselves into an apology, without assuming responsibility for emotional states that belong entirely to someone else. The psyche operates in ways that protect its own integrity. When you were nice, you gave others the power to determine your worth through their reactions. Their approval became your oxygen. Their displeasure became your crisis. This is not sustainable. The self will not tolerate this arrangement indefinitely. What emerges first, then, is a kind of holy indifference, a capacity to care about someone deeply while remaining unmoved by their attempts to manipulate through guilt, through expectation, through the weaponization of your own sensitivity against you. You begin to notice when someone's emergency is not actually your responsibility. You begin to feel the difference between genuine need and the endless appetite of those who have learned to extract energy from your constant service. This is not cruelty. This is the psyche reclaiming its sovereignty. Second, there emerges a capacity to witness suffering without the compulsion to fix it. This stage often brings profound guilt because it contradicts everything you believed about your nature. You were taught that to be empathic meant to intervene, to rescue, to absorb the pain of others so they would not have to feel it fully. But individuation requires that each being face their own darkness. The unconscious, according to depth psychology, grows through confrontation with what it has avoided. When you rush to save someone from their own consequences, from their own necessary suffering, you do not help them. You steal from them the very experience their psyche has arranged for their growth. Through years of studying the unconscious, one truth became clear. Suffering that is earned, that arises from one's own choices and patterns, is not meant to be removed by external intervention. It is meant to be metabolized, integrated, learned from. The empath who stops being nice understands this at a level that transforms their entire approach to compassion. You begin to trust that others are capable, that their pain, while real, is also their teacher, that your role is not to prevent all difficulty, but to bear witness to it without collapsing into fusion, without losing yourself in the process of caring. This shift terrifies the parts of you that built an identity around being needed. If you are not the healer, the fixer, the one who saves, who are you? But the psyche answers, you are finally yourself, not a function, not a role, not a repository for the unprocessed grief of everyone you encounter. You are a sovereign being whose empathy can exist without self-destruction. The third stage reveals itself through the development of what I call discernment, the ability to feel everything yet respond to very little. This is perhaps the most sophisticated capacity that emerges when niceness falls away. As an empath, you were likely taught that feeling required action, that if you sensed someone's pain, you were obligated to address it, that your sensitivity carried with it an automatic responsibility to manage the emotional field of every space you occupied. This is false. Depth psychology reveals that the psyche can hold awareness of something without being compelled to act upon it. The mature empath learns to feel the anxiety in a room without absorbing it, to notice the manipulation in someone's request without having to explain or defend their refusal, to sense the emotional hunger in another without offering themselves as the meal. Discernment is the psychological boundary that allows you to distinguish between what is yours and what belongs to another. Without this capacity, empathy becomes a curse. You drown in the feelings of others, unable to locate your own position, your own truth, your own limits. What became clear through decades of observation is that most people do not want the truth. They want their feelings validated without any requirement to change. The empath who remains nice participates in this avoidance. They soothe, they accommodate, they enable the very patterns that cause the suffering in the first place. But when you stop being nice, you become dangerous to comfortable dysfunction. You feel the lie underneath the pleasant words. You sense the agenda behind the friendly request, and you are no longer willing to pretend you do not see it simply to maintain false peace. This is not judgment, this is clarity, and it changes everything. What surfaces forth is perhaps most unsettling, a willingness to disappoint, to become the villain in someone else's narrative. The psyche, in its movement toward wholeness, demands that you stop managing your image in the minds of others. This terrifies the part of you that survived by being liked, by being seen as good, by ensuring that no one ever had cause to reject you. But the unconscious operates according to truth, not approval. Individuation, as I came to understand, cannot occur while the persona remains inflated with the need to be seen positively by all observers. There will be people who interpret your boundaries as cruelty, who mistake your refusal to enable as abandonment, who label your self-preservation as selfishness. Let them. This is the work. The empath who stops being nice must pass through the fire of being misunderstood by the very people they once contorted themselves to please. You will be called cold by those who benefited from your warmth. You will be accused of changing by those who preferred you depleted. You will be judged as heartless by those whose survival depended on your lack of boundaries. And you will continue anyway, because the alternative, returning to the prison of performative compassion, is no longer tolerable. The self has tasted freedom, and it will not go back. I recall a woman who came to me devastated because her family had labeled her selfish after she refused to host the holidays for the first time in 15 years. She had poured herself into these gatherings, managed every detail, absorbed every conflict, ensured everyone's comfort at the expense of her own. And when she finally said no, when she chose rest over service, they did not ask what had changed for her. They did not inquire about her well-being. They simply recalibrated their narrative to make her the problem. What emerged in our work together was a recognition. Their anger was not about her refusal. It was about the loss of her function. She had been the emotional infrastructure that allowed everyone else to remain unconscious, and when she withdrew that service, the entire system destabilized. This was not her failure, this was her breakthrough. The psyche will not sustain false roles indefinitely. Your willingness to be misunderstood is the price of your liberation. The fifth characteristic appears as energetic sovereignty. Your field no longer bleeds into every room you enter. This is a subtle shift that carries profound implications. When you were nice, your energy extended outward automatically, seeking to harmonize, to smooth, to adjust to whatever frequency dominated the space. But what the collective unconscious teaches is that this constant broadcasting depletes the life force. The empath who stops being nice learns to contain their energy, to hold it close, to stop offering it freely to every person and situation they encounter. This is not withholding. This is conservation. The psyche has its own intelligence, operating beneath awareness. It knows when your energy is being siphoned, when your presence is being exploited, when your openness is being treated as an invitation to dump. And it begins to close the gates. You walk into rooms differently now. You no longer scan for who needs you, who is upset, who requires management. You remain in your own body, your own center, your own experience. This shift often brings accusations of aloofness. People notice you are no longer as available, as responsive, as attuned to their every fluctuation. They interpret your containment as rejection. But you are not rejecting them. You are finally including yourself in the circle of beings worthy of your care. Beyond this lies the integration of healthy aggression, what I termed the reclamation of psychological teeth. This stage disturbs many empaths because they have been taught that any form of aggression is violent, dangerous, proof of spiritual regression. This is false. Aggression, in its essential form, is the life force that says no, that defends, that claims space, that refuses violation. Without access to this energy, the empath becomes prey to every exploitative dynamic, every boundary violation, every subtle form of manipulation that disguises itself as need. The unconscious holds both sides, the capacity for profound tenderness and the capacity for fierce protection. When niceness dominated, you could only access half of yourself. You were permitted softness but forbidden strength. You were allowed to nurture but not to destroy what threatened your well-being. But individuation requires integration of the shadow, and for the empath, the shadow often contains the very aggression they have disowned in order to remain safe, likable, good. When you stop being nice, this energy returns. You find yourself capable of anger that does not collapse into guilt, of boundaries that do not require justification, of refusals that carry the weight of finality. You grow teeth, not to harm others, but to protect what is sacred, not to attack, but to establish that you are no longer available for consumption. The seventh and final transformation manifests as a paradox. You become simultaneously more loving and more dangerous. This is the nature of the integrated empath, the one who has passed through the dissolution of niceness and emerged as something far more powerful. Your love no longer requires you to abandon yourself. Your compassion no longer depends on your willingness to be destroyed in the process of caring. You can hold someone in deep regard while refusing to participate in their dysfunction. You can feel profound connection while maintaining absolute clarity about where you end and they begin. But you are also dangerous now. Dangerous to systems that depend on your self-betrayal. Dangerous to people who require your silence to maintain their illusions. Dangerous to any dynamic that attempts to leverage your sensitivity as a weapon against your sovereignty. The archetypal forces at work in this transformation are ancient. Throughout myth and story, we see the motif of the wounded healer who must descend into their own underworld before they can serve others from a place of true power. You have made this descent. You have faced the terror of being disliked, misunderstood, labeled as less than you were, and you have survived. What remains is not the shallow niceness that kept you safe in childhood. What remains is a love so fierce it refuses to enable, a compassion so deep it trusts others to face their own darkness, a presence so grounded it cannot be moved by manipulation, guilt, or the countless strategies people employ to avoid their own necessary growth. What emerges from this metamorphosis is not the death of empathy, but its maturation into something that serves life rather than depletes it. You have not lost your gift. You have refined it. You have removed it from the context of survival and placed it in the service of truth. The psyche, in its movement toward wholeness, demanded this transformation. You could not remain in the prison of performative compassion without fracturing entirely. The self knew this, even when your conscious mind resisted. Every instance of depletion, every moment of resentment, every flash of rage at being taken for granted. These were not signs of your failure as an empath. These were the psyche's alarm system, signaling that the cost of niceness had become unbearable. And so, you changed. Not because you became cruel, but because you became honest. Not because you lost your capacity to care, but because you finally extended that care to the one who needed it most, yourself. What you are now is what you were always meant to become, an empath with boundaries, a sensitive being with sovereignty, a person capable of profound feeling who refuses to drown in the feelings of others. This is not regression, this is completion. The world will adjust to your transformation, or it will not. Either way, you are no longer available for the role you once played. You have stepped out of the story where your worth depended on your willingness to disappear. You have claimed a different narrative entirely. You who have stopped being nice have not betrayed your gift. You have finally become worthy of carrying it. For years, perhaps decades, you offered your sensitivity to a world that mistook it for weakness, that exploited it without gratitude, that demanded more and more until you had nothing left. But the psyche does not abandon those who honor its truth. You honored the truth of your depletion. You honored the wisdom of your anger. You honored the part of you that finally said, no more. And in that honoring, you opened a doorway to a form of empathy that does not require your destruction. You are not less now. You are more present, because you are no longer scattered across the emotional needs of everyone you encounter. More powerful, because your energy belongs to you first. More loving, because your love now flows from fullness rather than obligation. The transformation is complete when you understand this. Stopping being nice was not the end of your compassion. It was the beginning of your self-respect. And from that foundation, everything you offer to the world carries a different quality. Not the desperate giving of someone seeking approval, but the sovereign generosity of a being who knows their own worth. You have passed through the fire of becoming someone others may not recognize. You have withstood the accusations, the guilt, the fear that you were turning into something terrible. But you did not become terrible. You became true. And that truth, that hard-won, boundary-protected, self-honoring truth, is the most profound gift you could ever offer. Not to others first, but to yourself. Not because the world deserves it, but because you do. The journey continues from here, but you are no longer walking it as the person who believed their only value lay in how much they could endure for others. You walk it now as someone who has learned that empathy without self-preservation is not virtue. It is violence against the self. You have stopped being nice, and in doing so, you have become free.